So in this lesson, students are exploring correlations between volume and surface area in 3D figures. Valte would specifically focus on cylinders because in nature it's really easy to find tree trunks and to use them as cylinders for comparisons with our classroom work. And then also we use 3D prisms. We could use Toblerone bars, for example, from our candy store to do that, and then give students a little bit of creativity when they have to walk around the site on a nature walk to find something similar in nature with a prismatic shape, but preferably with triangle bases. In this activity, then students would start by creating a cylinder out of a piece of paper. Everyone should, do it to their own desire, so you're going to have different heights and shapes and different diameters, and they should all be able to calculate the volume and the surface area for their cylinder that they've created, and then do it a couple different times. So if they don't feel like cutting a piece of paper, they could do one direction, with a paper that is taller than wider, and make a taller and skinnier cylinder, measuring the diameter of the base, using that to find its area and times the height, surface area, and then reversing it, and then having a much wider and much shorter cylinder, and then comparing between the two and see if they can find a correlation between the dimensions and any kind of proportionality or expectation or anything for that. Once students feel comfortable finding finding volume and surface area based off of diameter or radius or circumference, then we move on to taking the lesson outside in nature and finding various tree trunks where they do the same thing. But in this case, students should measure the circumference of the tree trunk in a pretty consistent area of the tree, and then choose kind of a cross-section of the trunk and just pick a height for themselves, anything from a couple centimeters to maybe a meter, depending on your units. So they can kind of vary that themselves, but then work through the same calculations, and then find at least one, if not two other trees to do the same calculations. But this time, once they find that initial circumference, use that to determine how big of a cross-section or how high should this new cylinder from that tree trunk be to maintain the same volume as the previous one, and can they do it with varying circumferences, and then notice the correlation between how wide that section is with how tall it is to maintain volume between shapes. In a similar fashion, we would start with the 3D prisms and do the same kind of idea. Start in the classroom, practice creating those structures and finding the area of the triangles, and then using the height to find the surface area and the volume of the various faces, making sure that they're extremely clear on the terms base and sides, especially in a figure like a 3D triangular prism, because in that case, just because it sits on like a Toblerone bar, for example, the bases are in fact the triangular ends, not the part it's sitting on the table, which sometimes provides a stumbling block for language with students as well. And then giving them a chance to find something on their own that could mimic that same shape. And this one you might have to be a little creative or lenient with what you determine to be a triangular prism, because that's less of a common shape in nature. So it might end up being that you find leaves that are triangular, and then were they to have two leaves of the same area, and or two congruent leaves, we'll say, and if they had faces between the two to create a 3D shape, what would that volume be, versus having a distinct solid figure that they can find in nature, although I think it lends itself to some creativity on the student's behalf. But you do the same processes again, where once you have one shape, go through all the calculations for its area, surface areas, volume, and then find something that's either larger in its base area or significantly smaller, and then determine what proportions would you need to have that give the same volume as the original you had. And they could do photo comparisons, drawing comparisons, and their notes to show how they determined from one to the other and made those comparisons in this.